Why hello you lovely little peppercorns, my name is Noa Lee, and Sonic Forces is a strange game that at its heart is more or less what you'd expect from a boost-era Sonic game combined with some really unhinged and clumsy design choices. The story revolves around a being known as Infinite, a new creation of Dr. Eggman's that has allowed him to take over the majority of the world and use it for his own sinister desires. At the beginning we see Infinite invading a city of some sort as Sonic rushes in to take on this new foe. However, unexpectedly, several classic villains, and Zavok, join in on the fun, beating Sonic into submission in the process. The story then cuts to 6 months later after Eggman has taken over, with Knuckles leading the furry brigade of side characters no one cares about, and everyone just assumes that Sonic has been killed for some reason. Did you guys see him die or have a funeral or something? All we see is Sonic passing out, and then the game just cuts to 6 months later, and we're all just supposed to believe that Sonic kicked the bucket? Yeah, sure. As you might imagine, Sonic is perfectly fine and alive, which we find out about in literally the next cutscene. Well, that is after we spend 10 minutes designing our own original character and are subjected to even more painful lines of exposition. This, of course, is one of the major selling points of Sonic Forces, in that you can design, customize, and even control your own original the character, and if I'm being perfectly honest, it's pretty damn fun. You start by selecting your character's gender and species, as well as other physical traits, but as you progress through the game, you'll unlock a wealth of different items and clothing to customize your OC even further. Each time you beat a level, you're rewarded with anywhere from 4 to 20 items depending on your score and other little challenges you may have completed, which has the effect of always giving you something to look forward to. And at least for me, my pattern of play was as follows: beat a level, see all the cool shit I just unlocked, spend 10 minutes recustomizing my character, go beat another level, and repeat. And laying my cards fully on the table, I probably spent around 3 of my 6 hours with Sonic Forces just mixing, matching, and accessorizing my OC. Like, this mode is way more fun than it really should be. Though I never did find a way to make my character look quite enough like Bubsy the Bobcat for my taste, which is just a gigantic missed opportunity if you ask me. Overall, it's pretty clear that a lot of time and thought went into this aspect of Sonic Forces, but if I had a criticism of the OC creator, it would have to be that it really doesn't mesh with the rest of the game. Like, at all. For one thing, the story keeps switching you from playing as the surprisingly still alive Sonic and your avatar, and occasionally both, while trying to establish a character arc to your mute, blank slate of a creation. Each cutscene and level showcases your OC sticking out like a sore dick after a rough night, while other characters deliver some of the cringiest lines of dialogue about war and battle and the power of friendship and, did anyone really expect anything better? Like, I understand that there's a certain subset of the Sonic fandom that's into this sort of thing, and I'm not trying to ruin anyone's fun. If you like this kind of thing, more power to you, matey, but they could at least put a little effort behind the cheesy writing. Honestly, if this is the route they were going to go with, they should have just made the whole game about playing as your original character. Have you start the game as a timid little furball who gradually rises in the ranks of the resistance group, rather than have them be a rookie for like 1 level and then become the most important character second only to Sonic in like 10 minutes. At least for me, I found the levels where you play as the Avatar more enjoyable than the Sonic levels anyway, because you actually have to, play the game rather than just hold a button and wiggle the thumbstick a bit. And yes, I know that's an oversimplification of the boost mechanics and whatnot, and that I don't understand the appeal of these games and blah-de-blah-de-blah, so you might as well start drafting your hate comments now. You could even take it a bit further and have the OC be fully voiced like in Mass Effect or Saints Row and actually interact with other characters rather than them just making affirmative grunts to acknowledge their role in the conversation.
That was great! We're like a well-oiled machine, fighting a well-oiled machine.
But, I mean, as tacked on as this aspect of the game feels, I did have a lot of fun with it, so I'm not going to criticize it too harshly, though I do wish the development team would have fleshed this idea out and had made it a little more integral to the core of the game. Though, while we're on the subject of things being tacked on, why the hell is Classic Sonic here? Like, for real, he shows up for no reason, and each of his levels feels so isolated from the rest of the goings-on that it's almost like you're playing a completely different game. Guess they just needed people to think this was a sequel to Sonic Generations in order to increase sales or something. Classic Sonic's whole shtick in this game is that he shows up to interact with Tails, who's apparently gone crazy after Sonic's defeat, though he never actually shows this distress, and now Classic Sonic and Tails try to stop Eggman independently from the rest of the cast. Each of his stages plays out more or less like you'd expect, with the same stiff platforming and scripted speedy sections pioneered in the 2D levels of Generations. Though the level design of these stages is even more monotonous than that, if you can believe it. At least with Generations, you had the excitement of seeing classic stages reimagined with modern graphics and 3D models, but here the classic Sonic levels are just plain bad. Platforms and stage hazards are placed throughout each level without any real thought to how they'd affect the flow or structure of the stage, and more often than not, Classic Sonic's route from start to finish is a linear jaunt with very few branching paths or really anything of interest. Honestly, the classic Sonic stages should have just been removed entirely, or added in as a bonus mode or something like that. Or better yet, why not just play as Tails? You could accomplish the same goal of having purely side-scrolling levels that break things up a bit, but you could also design them around Tails' unique abilities rather than having this odd redundancy between these stages and the 2D sections of playing as Sonic and your avatar. Classic Sonic's levels are built primarily around platforming anyway, and there are very few opportunities for you to use momentum to reach different areas and secrets like in the classic games, so why not just build them in such a way that only Tails can traverse them? But nah, let's shoehorn in Classic Sonic and make him do all the dirty work. Then have Tails explain to him what needs to be done before each level while he stares blankly into the ether, like he's trying to hold in an awkward fart. Then of course we have the levels where you play as modern Sonic, which are... they're okay. Look, if you've watched my other Sonic videos, you probably already know that I do not like the boost games. Like, I understand the core idea behind them, that you have to learn the layout of each level to know when to boost and when not to, so you can beat each stage as fast as possible, but personally, I just find this mechanic so boring. Sonic, modern Sonic that is, has the most levels, which makes sense seeing as this is his game and all, so most of your time spent with Sonic Forces will feature you just blazing through enemies that pose no actual threat whatsoever. Plus, once you stop moving at top speed and actually taking the level around you, you start to notice all the little missteps and inconsistencies to this world. Yeah, like these guys are really dangerous. How the hell did Eggman take over the world with these useless fucks? Sonic Forces also has a bad habit of repeating levels between Sonic and your OC, which is somewhat understandable seeing as the boost mechanic kinda uses up all the art assets and level gimmicks pretty quickly, so I imagine the game was structured like this in order to reduce development costs and extend the length of the game. Most of the time this isn't too noticeable because the levels are remixed in some way, and it can be kinda nice to take things a bit slower with your avatar on a similar level to one you previously shot through as Sonic or vice versa, but occasionally you'll get a level that's a straight up copy and paste of one you've played previously. Like this one where I go through as my avatar and then 2 levels later I'm going through the exact same area as Sonic with no noticeable differences or layout. Finally we have the tag team levels, which have you playing as Sonic and your avatar simultaneously, and you know what? These are probably the best levels overall. They could stand to be a little more refined and built around the mechanic of swapping from Sonic and your OC on the fly, but truth be told, I think there's quite a bit of potential here. These levels have sections where you race by at blinding speed using Sonic's powers, and then occasionally you'll come upon an area where you have to make use of your avatar's weapon or slow down for a bit of 3D platforming. And the way in which you swap between characters simply by utilizing one of their unique abilities that are tied to their own dedicated buttons is so smooth and seamless that it's a wonder why Sonic Team didn't build the whole game around this idea. But then again, this is the same company that's so concerned about pissing off its fan base that any fresh ideas they have instantly get buried under mountains of old concepts, awful characters, and another fucking remake of Green Hill Zone. Seriously, I think if Sonic Team were to develop an entire game around this concept, preferably with Sonic and Tails as the lead characters, and they were able to refine the controls and level design a bit, I think we could end up with a pretty kick-ass game. Imagine playing as Sonic and Tails as a buddy duo along the lines of Banjo-Kazooie, where you're technically playing as 2 different characters, but their controls are so interlinked and their abilities so different yet complementary that it feels as though you're playing as a single entity. I think that'd be awesome. However, these tag team levels are only a small portion of the overall experience, so they unfortunately don't stick around long enough for the developers to do anything interesting with them, which is more or less the MO of the entire game, come to think of it. And that's a bit of a shame, because there really are a lot of unique ideas at play in Sonic Forces, none of which are actually fleshed out in any meaningful way, but the foundation for something really good is certainly there. At the very least, I do have to admit that it's pretty refreshing to see a Sonic game with this level of polish, even if said polish is hiding a broken, inconsistent mess underneath. The look of this game is really well done, with levels that perhaps aren't the most enjoyable to play, but are at least interesting enough on a visual level that the game's almost worth a playthrough on aesthetics alone. Some of the stages are sort of like a reimagining of classic levels smashed together, though thankfully these levels are primarily in name only, as their layouts are completely new and the ways in which you play through them varies greatly from their original counterparts. The game starts you off on familiar territory with you playing through a variation of Green Hill Zone, followed by a new take on Chemical Plant Zone, which is something that's never been done in any Sonic game ever. Oh wait. Personally, I think they should have just taken the time to create completely original stages, but I have to admit that I really do like the way in which the developers have added some new ideas and flair to these tried and true levels in order for them to stand on their own footing, rather than simply relying on nostalgia to carry the load. Green Hill Zone has been merged with Sand Hill Zone from Sonic Adventure 1 to make it a little more visually interesting, and apparently so Sonic can cue us in early on how excellent the dialogue writing in this game is.
Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill right now.
Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill right now.
Oh, that hurt. The aforementioned Chemical Plant Zone is now frozen over with ice draping off of pipes, snow falling and accumulating, and frost coating every uncovered surface, all of which culminates into an atmosphere that really sells you on the feeling of running through a frostbitten industry with accompanying music that adds to this level's flair, furthering this icy aesthetic. It's basically butt rock like a lot of the music in this game, but once you get over how cheesy it is, it's not too bad. It's frosty butt rock. Though if I had to pick a favorite level, it would have to be the one where you're running through Metropolis with your avatar. The look of this level with its almost futuristic white aesthetic and kickin' music makes this probably the highlight of the entire game, at least for me. As you travel through this level, you're being chased by Infinite, who's constantly using his reality warping powers to screw with gravity and turn skyscrapers into large monstrosities in his own visage. And while playing through this level, I actually found myself getting a huge rush of excitement and adrenaline, and wait, it's over? Yeah, so here's the thing with the levels in Sonic Forces. They are really, really short. No joke, I'm pretty sure the longest level in this game is only like 2 minutes long, and that was even on my first attempt without really trying to speedrun it at all. Yikes. Over the past few weeks, I've heard many criticize Sonic Forces for having lazy level design that's far inferior to the prior two Boost games, and I can kind of see why people are saying that, even though, at least from where I sit, the levels tend to play out just like the ones found in Generations and Unleashed, so I was kind of surprised that so many fans were taking issue with this aspect of the game. So just to be sure I wasn't missing something, I went back and played most of the modern Sonic levels of Generations. And overall, I found them to be the same roller coaster of very little actual gameplay, but here's the thing, all the levels are like twice the size of those found in Sonic Forces, so I think this is just a case of the shallow gameplay being a lot more noticeable this time around, simply because the levels never last long enough for you to get into the groove of the game. Generations, to its credit, featured levels getting gradually more difficult as they went on, to the point that each stage seemed to end at just the right time, after a huge set-piece moment or when the level had exhausted all of its interesting ideas and gimmicks. Basically, Generations gave you a warm-up period for you to get accustomed to the level, followed by layering and challenge after challenge, but Sonic Forces, in contrast, only ever seems to give you this introductory section of the level, ending the stage at the point where it should be introducing new concepts and toying with its theme and structure. It's not that the level design in Forces is any worse, it's just that it doesn't stick around long enough for anything interesting to occur, since all of its unique ideas need to be spread out amongst 3 different characters with 3 different movesets and abilities. Then there's the fact that the 3D levels were all clearly designed around Sonic's boost ability and then restructured after the fact to accommodate playing as your avatar, so when you no longer have this power, the levels just don't flow like they should, and each enemy encounter feels like a neophyte game developer just figured out how to copy and paste baddies onto the screen. When boosting, you plow right through a crowd of enemies like they're dominoes, but when playing as your OC, you have to stop and meticulously take each out one at a time. Though, to be fair, this issue is alleviated slightly if you use your starter weapon, which is like a flamethrower of sorts, but all this seems to do is highlight how useless all the other weapons are in comparison. It's design choices like these that ultimately make Sonic Forces the muddy and inconsistent mess that it is. Every unique idea or interesting mechanic this game has to offer contradicts some other aspect of the game, to the point that you can't praise any single facet without first separating it from the larger project. The Avatar and Wispan ideas are neat, but the level design doesn't reflect their abilities. The tag team stages are fairly fun, but they only make up a small portion of the game. The music and visual design is genuinely great, but Sonic's boost ability and the brevity of the stages don't give you much of a chance to enjoy them. And the developers have polished and ironed out all of the bugs and glitches, but the core of the game is such a gigantic mess that it hardly matters. Then there's the issue that the game sometimes seems to forget who you're supposed to be playing as at certain points. Classic Sonic, Modern Sonic, and your OC all have different movesets, but some abilities are shared between characters, so a problem often arises when you're told about an ability that one character has, but then are never told that another character has that power as well. Like here, I'm being chased by a laser beam of death, and I come to a spot where I need to use Sonic's Stomp ability, yet I'm playing as my OC, and the game never bothered to tell me that my avatar shares this attack, and it's literally the only spot in the game where they'd need to use it. Not to mention that the last few levels of the game try to up the ante, rightfully so, but they're so poorly designed that they end up just pissing me off. They're not really hard per se, as there's checkpoints seemingly around every corner, but the level layout and placement of enemies and hazards make these stages feel like they were constructed almost at random, and without any thought to how the player would traverse through this area. And then there's the story, and holy shit, where do I even start? Most of the narrative is told through dialogue between characters before the beginning of the level or during the stage itself. Characters will blather on and on about how high the stakes are, and I think the game is trying to convey that there's supposed to be several different teams running around different parts of the stage with you, as well as that different missions are occurring simultaneously, but none of this is conveyed very well. There's a part where Sonic goes off to fight Shadow, only for the real Shadow to show up like 2 seconds in to destroy his doppelganger. Then immediately afterwards, on the world map screen, Sonic and Shadow have a conversation, presumably through radio communication, that Infinite can create a bunch of copies of whomever he wants. And then 2 seconds later, and seemingly part of the same conversation, Knuckles butts in to tell your OC that he needs you to take care of something because Sonic is off fighting Shadow, and it's really confusing because the game makes it seem as though everyone already knows that Shadow's actually on their side, and they should have known all along anyway because Shadow's been apparently working with Rouge, who's been working with Knuckles and everyone else from the get-go, and god damn, the writing is bad. Like, even by Sonic the Hedgehog standards, it's just fucking awful. God.
80% of our forces have been wiped out, and we've lost contact with the rest.
Wait, what? Holy shit, are they dead? Like, seriously, Infinite just straight up murdered their asses? Do I get to see this? Am I supposed to care? By wiped out, do you mean that they all just got a boo-boo or something? You're giving me mixed narrative tones here, game. Sonic Forces can't seem to decide if it wants to be dark and edgy or lighthearted and child-friendly, so it continually skirts around the issues at hand, never making up its mind as to whether it wants to be Battle of the Bastards or Battle for Bikini Bottom. Plot threads and insights into the story are also introduced and forgotten about almost instantaneously, to the point that it feels as though this game's narrative is nothing more than a bulleted list of ideas one would make prior to writing a rough draft. Okay, so let's put in a shit ton of classic and recognizable villains, and Zavok, in order to raise the stakes, but then not actually do anything with them apart from maybe a tacked-on boss battle or a single line of dialogue that mentions their name. Or not even that much, as with Chaos, who's seen in the opening cutscene and then the background of like one other towards the end of the game, and never again. I don't even think anyone mentions him at any point in the story, at least Doppelganger or Shadow got a cutscene before they pointed out the blatantly obvious. Metal Sonic only gets an incredibly boring boss battle that's almost identical to the final fight with Infinite, so that hardly counts. And speaking of Infinite, what the hell happens to him after you beat him? He just runs off like he's going to heal up and then come back stronger than before, but then we never see nor hear from him again. Apparently the writers just sort of forgot to tie up that loose plot thread, along with about a dozen others. What we're left with is a game that has a lot of decent ideas, nice visuals and music, and a level of polish not seen in a 3D Sonic game since, ever, but then it's mixed with some incredibly short and mostly boring levels, tacked on game modes, and some of the worst writing I've seen all year. The amount of actual gameplay present is paper thin, and what little there is so uninspired and underdeveloped that when viewed detached from the visual, story, and cutscenes, it makes up only a tiny fraction of the overall package, and when viewed in its entirety, the game is nothing more than a handful of good ideas that never amount to anything. The good parts of Sonic Forces, although nascent, are pretty decent, and I hope that Sonic Team will have the good sense to expand upon them in future games, but the poor design choices, terrible narrative, and overall presentation of the game as a whole greatly outweighs anything positive I have to say, so give this game a shot if you're a diehard fan, but otherwise, don't waste your time.